Thank you, Crystal, and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for Social Media Strategies for Advancing Your Project. Before we get started, I want to review a few things about the webinar classroom so you can get the most out of the session. First, we have the phone lines muted to reduce background noise, and the audio for this webinar is being broadcast through your computer. If you'd like to stream the audio through your computer, please click the Communicate menu and select Audio Broadcast. If you would like to participate in the verbal Q&A at the end of the webinar, or if you run into connection problems with the audio stream, please call in and access the audio to the telephone conference line listed on the lower right corner of the slide. If you'd like to share something like a comment or a response to a question, you can type it into the chat panel. Make sure to send the chat to all participants. During the presentation, if you have a question, type it into the Q&A panel. We are monitoring the questions that come in, and we'll get to your questions at the end of the presentation. The resources we mentioned will be available, along with the recording, on the VISTA's webinar page of the VISTA campus, and you will also receive an email once the files are posted. And as we mentioned, this webinar is being recorded. Please note that we have live closed captions of the audio, and they can be viewed in the Media Viewer panel, and we'll begin in just a second. Hello, everyone. I'd like to officially welcome you to today's webinar, Social Media Strategies for Advancing Your Project. I'm Molly Pelzer, a VISTA Training Coordinator with the Corporation for National and Community Service, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. I'll also be facilitating the live Q&A at the end of the session. I'd like to welcome our main speaker today, Richard Mello. Richard is a communications specialist at Education Northwest. Previously, he created training and e-learning materials for AmeriCorps VISTA and also served 2 years at AmeriCorps in Portland, Oregon during the mid-1990s. We are also joined today by Bethany from Education Northwest and Sam from JBS International, who helped to prepare today's webinar and will be managing the WebEx technology. You'll also see them in the chat and the Q&A to help address any questions you may have during the session. A little later in the presentation, we'll hear from 2 guest speakers, VISTA Leader alum, Lexi Quick, and Marketing and Outreach Specialist at the Corporation for National and Community Service, Mike Kizone. Here's what we hope you'll get out of the webinar. We'd like you to be able to articulate ways that social media can help your project meet specific goals, apply strategies to build social media audiences, and differentiate primary audiences and strengths of various social media platforms. And now I'm going to turn it over to Richard. Richard, take it away.
Hi, everyone. Before getting underway, let's start with a chat question. We want to hear from you about the differences in using social media in a professional setting like VISTA versus the way you might use social media just when connecting with friends and family. What should you keep in mind when posting as a representative of an organization? Please enter your ideas in the chat box and make sure you send to all participants. We want your comments to be visible to everyone, so please be sure to enter them in the chat panel and not the Q&A panel further down on the screen.
Okay, so I'm going to take a minute and read through some of these, and it looks like spelling and grammar, no religious affiliation, voice, tone of organization, wording, professional verbiage, correct grammar, objective viewpoint, know your audience, content, of course, mission and goals of the organization, stay away from politics, again, avoiding politics, less exclamation points, and let's see, we've still got more coming in. No TXT, no text language. No opinions, being confident in what you are posting, and add photos.
Yeah, these are quite a few good points. We covered a lot of these points during the presentation, but it sounds like the people who are posting these already have a pretty good sense of how to do this, which is pretty awesome. Okay, so we'll go ahead and let's just jump right in to the next part of the presentation. Let's get started with an overview on what you might want to accomplish with social media and how social media might help. Let's think about social media in the context of reaching out to the community at large. Working with the community means communicating with the community. And being effective requires strategies for communications, outreach, recruitment, relationship building, and resource development. Let's take a closer look at how social media can play a part in these broader strategies for helping you bring the community together and share your messages, and look at some ways to make these efforts more effective. To help to lay our foundation, we'll begin with this question: what can social media do for you? Technology and the internet can be seen as impersonal, as a way for people to avoid connecting directly with other people. It doesn't have to be that way. You can use social media as a public space for your project, and it can be a very human face. On your social media pages, you can post updates and photos from your project to give anyone browsing the internet a quick look at what your project is about. You can even use something like Facebook as your own project website. If you post photos of people, particularly smiling people who appear meaningfully engaged in their activities, your posts can create a quick emotional connection with your social media audience. You can create a lasting impression and help people get to know you. You can also find and develop relationships with partners and like-minded individuals over social media. You can encourage stakeholders, meaning volunteers, board members, donors, clients, beneficiaries, and others, to connect to the organization through social media and to use their social media accounts to highlight their relationship to your organization and help spread the word. For example, volunteers can post pictures of themselves and other volunteers in action and talk about why they volunteer, what they are accomplishing, and how they're making a difference. And we'll see more of this later. You won't find new big money donors or recruit hundreds of new volunteers overnight just by starting a Twitter or Facebook page. For most nonprofits and public agencies, growing a follower base is slow, and the yields, at least early on, are small. Over time and with consistent, smart effort, social media can start to pay off as a viable way to help you meet some of your project's goals. For outreach, social media platforms work best when used as one part of a multi-approach strategy blended with more traditional tactics like direct mail, phone banks, canvassing, and others. Are there other benefits? You can create a social media presence for free. And when you get the hang of posting photos, videos, and writing tweets and other social media text, it doesn't take that much time when compared to other forms of outreach, such as printing and hanging flyers. Let's run down the three main uses, or the three main ways you might use social media to support your VISTA project. Number one, raise awareness and provide information resources. Number two, fuel campaigns / drives. And number three, engage people in conversation. We'll talk about each of these in a little more detail. Raising awareness and providing resources. This involves posting anything from links to PDFs to little nuggets of knowledge online. This works best when you are regularly generating content to share, such as blog posts or photos from events. If you're not generating content, you can become a curator / aggregator of newly appearing resources to support your mission and message. Reposting articles, blog posts, and resources from other organizations does take effort in finding appropriate resources to share and vetting them. If you are promoting an event or other time-based happening, like in this example, Hunger Action Month, you can make a plan or editorial calendar for regular release of social media posts, and even write the posts ahead of time. One rule of thumb is to promote events 1 month, 1 week, and 1 day before they happen, and post other updates in the meantime. Social media platforms often make it easy to reply to posts, and this can be a powerful tool in connecting with constituents, like-minded organizations, and others. It's important to keep these conversations upbeat and avoid too many conversations, as these posts can begin to look like noise for people who are following your posts, mainly for information and resources. Let's take a look at an example of how one project uses social media. One of the things that Habitat for Humanity St. Louis does to draw people to its social media is they create a newsletter and a blog. Every time a newsletter or blog post appear, not only do they go out to their regular followers, The organization has now generated a link they can share over several social media platforms like Twitter and Facebook. This gives them something unique to post on a regular basis. The organization also creates informational images to share over social media to promote its events. This is a sample of an image that the organization created that they can post like a photo that has text that tells people the main things they need to know about an event. It's just one approach for promoting an event. Again, the event gets promoted over several different social media platforms, and they create several different posts to promote the same event, so that it stays fresh in their audience's mind. When it comes to promoting events, repetition is good. As we said earlier, photos of smiling people meaningfully engaged in activities can go a long way to creating an emotional connection with your social media audience. Habitat for Humanity St. Louis often practices this on its Twitter feed. In this tweet, Habitat for Humanity says, "Thank you to a supporter who posted photos from one of their events." Social media platforms provide an awesome opportunity to reach out and acknowledge your supporters, which helps keep them engaged and provides you plenty of opportunities to say thank you. Okay, let's pause again for another chat question. Please enter your ideas on what makes this photo good to post over social media in the chat box. Make sure you send to all participants.
Okay, so we've got some responses coming in. Everything from the visual, a celebrity, celebrity appeal, the hashtags that we have, the terrific beard, and of course it's George R.R. Martin. And a really good point actually is that it kills the stereotype that Vistas are only recent college grads. The Vista logo is prominent. More hashtags, it's friendly looking. And I think that probably is the most of them for the most part. Easily remembered. Let's see, I think that might be the most of them, Rich.
Yeah, and those are, again, these are really great responses. Yeah, for anyone who doesn't know, this is George R.R. Martin, who's the creator of Game of Thrones, the book series, and also the HBO series, which is incredibly popular on social media. And so what this does is like when people who are currently Vista supporters see George R.R. Martin holding a I Am Vista sign, it kind of like energizes them to be a little more excited about Vista. Maybe that they've just been passively following the Vista Twitter feed for a while. Then they see this and it kind of stops them and kind of gets them energized. It also opens the door to Vista to people who might be like ready to be supporters of Vista, but don't really know about it. But they kind of learn about it through something like George R.R. Martin. And these are a lot of great responses here. Good quality of photo. This is a good quality photo where you could like see him very clearly, and you could read what's in the sign that's in his hand. And plus, he is using on the poster that he has. There's a couple hashtags. There's the I Am Vista hashtag and the Vista 50 hashtag, which helps connect this picture to people who then search for those hashtags. Will find everything that's posted under those hashtags too. So we've seen a lot of like responses here that show that this does seem like it is a pretty effective photo to post over social media, and I totally agree with that. And you guys have a lot of really great ideas. If you've been following the chat box, you've seen a lot of really great ideas on how effective something like this can be.
Yeah, great. Well, thank you so much, Rich. Now we are going to transition and hear from Lexi Quick. Lexi served at the New Hampshire Food Bank for her first year of service and then stayed a second year as the program's Vista leader. During that time, she was tasked with social media work, including helping with the social media presence for Vista leaders for the AmeriCorps 20th anniversary celebration. She's now working as the volunteer and community engagement coordinator for Syracuse Northeast Community Center and the Northeast Hawley Development Association. Both organizations share the mission of strengthening Syracuse through community engagement. Welcome, Lexi. What are you going to share with us today?
Thanks. Hi, everybody. I'm going to be talking about some different ways that I use social media, mostly through my time as a VISTA leader. That's when it came really into play for me and my program. And my main goal for my year as leader was to get our program noticed and to increase the visibility of all the work that our members were doing across the state. So the first thing that I had to do was figure out where my audience actually was and then how I could reach them. So the best combination that I found was using YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook all together to increase our visibility. And then once I decided on these channels, I had to figure out what my audience actually wanted to see. I'm sure it's not a big shock for all of you that funny and creative posts got the most likes and shares, but those kind of posts also made people more receptive to serious content. So I learned that you can't just overwhelm people with the problems that need to be fixed. You need to keep your content pretty upbeat and enjoyable to maintain an audience. And then another piece to look at is who is already out there using social media well. So the National AmeriCorps and AmeriCorps alums accounts are really helpful for finding bandwagons to jump on. And what I mean by that is they're normally looking and asking for news from programs, using hashtags that you can copy, and sharing content that you can either comment on or share yourself. So my pictures on these slides were actually from the Day of the A campaign that AmeriCorps did during the 20th anniversary. They were asking for everyone's pictures showing AmeriGear and showing them out in the community. So it was really the perfect chance for me to bring out some of my program's pictures, and it helped AmeriCorps' campaign, but it also got my own program's name noticed. And then getting a simple retweet or a share from one of these major accounts gets your message seen by a huge audience. So don't be afraid to participate and engage with them. That's actually why they have the account. Then when it comes to developing content, I would normally give myself a little chunk of time, maybe like 1 cup of coffee in the morning or afternoon, just to browse Twitter and Facebook to see if there was anything my program could contribute to or that I could use to promote our own visibility. So that could have been something from pop culture, like here, that people were copying, or maybe a contest that AmeriCorps was running. As you can see, I got a little carried away with Photoshop on more than one occasion. But I found that staying current and responding to things that were already going on was an easy way to create posts that weren't just surrounding an event or fundraiser. So if you're thinking that even that amount of time just kind of browsing is too much, I would check out a scheduler like Hootsuite. That way you can plan and schedule all of your posts ahead of time and then review which ones were the most successful. And then something that can help with your post development and scheduling is having plenty of stored pictures to choose from. I learned that you can never have too many pictures or videos, and I'm pretty sure that my members thought part of my role as VISTA leader was acting as the paparazzi, especially at service events. But even if these pictures didn't make it into one of the live tweets, I had enough saved for throwback posts later or to use as fillers in recap videos. So saving pictures will also help if Instagram is something your program is interested in. I didn't branch out into it because I didn't have a big stored up folder for pictures. And if you're going to get into that program, you've really got to make sure you've got enough content to keep people engaged and coming back. So actually, when I left my program, I left them with a giant folder of pictures to go through so that if Instagram was something they're looking at in the future, they could look back to it, or they could just use it in promo materials or new posts. And then one thing to look at with your social media setup is how you can make each channel work to support each other. For my program, we had a newsletter that we hosted online, which made it easy to share the whole document with just a little link. That way we could send out the long-form content through Facebook and Twitter. And our social media was probably the most heavily used during our Service Day events. In order to build up excitement about the events, we would share updates about prep and planning leading up to it through our Facebook and Twitter. And then on the day of the event, we really focused a lot on Twitter and tried to have a continuous stream of posts and updates, both from myself and members using specific hashtags and tagging different accounts. But also remember, the coverage doesn't stop after the event. So I would post recap videos of each event on YouTube, which made it easy to share them through Facebook and Twitter. So for me, the actual YouTube account itself didn't receive too much attention, but it was really helpful in creating engaging content that was shareable. And then another way to keep your audience engaged is to have your own thing. And I mean something that your program will be known for and people will end up looking for. In case you didn't already notice from my pictures, for my program, this was the Rosie pose. Since Vistas don't wear uniforms, we needed something to show our AmeriSpirit and let people know who we were, hence our signature pose in most of our pictures. And we also had visibility days, the first Friday of every month, where members were really encouraged to wear their Vista gear or at least strike a Rosie pose and share it through social media. And the purpose of these days was to increase our program's visibility, but it was also to get my members just active on social media. So as Vistas, you know, the work you're doing is really the top priority, but if you don't share that information about your project, your community isn't going to know about it. So even though I had to sometimes beg and hassle people into posting pictures, I did find that it made them more likely to use social media for their own projects. So some people used it to help find volunteers, others just shared updates about program success stories, and other people even used it to engage with other organizations in their community that had similar focuses. So while I was successful in promoting my own program and getting our name spread throughout the national service community, I think one of my bigger successes was getting my members to use social media creatively at their different host sites. And then one of the hardest things for me to grasp was that there really is no set formula for social media success. You've really got to play with the times and days that you post and change up your content until you find what your audience responds to. Like I said before, sharing the facts surrounding the needs of your community is necessary, but unless you have a hook to keep people coming back, your message is probably going to get lost. So don't be discouraged by slow growth in followers. Instead, focus on creating content that people are going to want to share. That way, if you only add 1 or 2 followers a week, but they share your post, you're actually adding their whole network to your number of viewers. So final message, stay positive, stay creative, and you will find what works best for you and your program.
Yeah, thank you, Lexi. That was really great to hear some of your tips and your experiences and how they worked out for you, which actually leads right into what we're going to do next. David Letterman might not be around anymore, but it doesn't mean we can't do a quick top 10 list. Hold on to your seats, folks. We're going to move through this quickly, so if you have questions, you can ask them later during the Q&A. Okay, top 10 best practices for social media. Number 1, know what you're trying to accomplish. You will be at your best on social media when you know what you want to get out of it. As we mentioned earlier, what is it you can get? You can raise awareness, fuel campaigns, and engage people. If you're a little fuzzy on what you want to accomplish, go back to the mission and core messages from your project or organization. Everything you do on social media should, in one way or another, support your mission and vision. Number 2, understand audiences for different platforms. People with different interests and expectations populate different platforms on social media. Some sites are more popular with young people. Others are driven by people motivated by professional networking and learning. To reach your ideal audience, it's good to know which segment of your audience is on which platform and tailor your messages and posts accordingly. This is a big topic, so we'll come back to it later. Number 3, takeaways. Try to give every social media post a takeaway, or in other words, a little nugget of information that your audience will be glad to have, such as how this tweet shares a nice little bit of information about the connection of mentoring to keeping kids in school. If your information is interesting enough and you post often enough, you'll grow your base of followers who are looking for more good stuff. And here's a couple tips. Make sure there's enough context to your posts that if someone new comes along, they can figure out what's going on. Also, teasing a link, which is what this tweet does, is a valid takeaway for a social media post. Okay, number 4, a lot of people mentioned this earlier, but make yourself look good. Proofread before posting, check to make sure your links work, and write in a voice that's enthusiastic yet professional. I saw someone post like, not too many exclamation points. That's just right. It's like exclamation points here and there are great, but too many, that's just too enthusiastic and not professional enough. So you want to like kind of walk that fine balance between being very professional and enthusiastic at the same time. Once you get some practice writing posts in a social media voice, You'll get the hang of it in no time. Okay, number 5, post consistently and often. Posting every day or several times a week will show people you're serious about social media, and in time, if you're creating interesting posts, people look forward to seeing what you have to say. Posting too often will cause people to zone you out. Again, this is a delicate balance. Okay, number 6, remember the Hatch Act. Of course, like in other phases of your VISTA existence, you need to make sure you are following the rules and not using VISTA social media accounts to support political candidates or encouraging people to join in religious activities. And Bethany just posted the link to the Hatch Act if you're unfamiliar with that at all. Okay, number 7, photos. A nice photo can really make a posting come alive, as Lexi was just saying. And research shows that a post with a photo is more likely to be noticed and shared. On the flip side, all too often, nonprofits post awful photos, like the backs of people's heads during a conference session, or ones that are blurry. Learning how a phone camera works, taking a bunch of photos and only posting the best, and learning some fundamental photo editing, like cropping and color balancing, can make a huge difference in how your audience views your posts. And it's also good to learn the quirks of different platforms. For example, one thing that Twitter does, which is somewhat unusual, is Twitter does not like long, tall, vertical photos. If you post a vertical photo of a person on Twitter, all that's going to show up on Twitter is the person's belly when someone's looking at it, when someone's scrolling through the feed. So the advice here is on Twitter, always use horizontal or landscape photos. And this is the kind of thing that you'll learn from experience as you post more and more photos on different social media platforms. Number 8, ads. Paying for ads can increase your visibility, and often you can spend just a few dollars to extend your reach to a very specific audience. Facebook ads and Google AdWords are 2 prime examples. To pay for ads, you'll need to use a credit card from your organization. There's quite a bit to learn in order to create online ads, and there isn't enough time in this webinar to cover even the basics. But if you think this is a route worth pursuing, handy tutorials are available and are included in the resource section. And also, I believe, Bethany just posted both links to where to learn more about AdWords and also more about Facebook ads. Okay, number 9, analytics. Most social media platforms will let you track how often your posts have appeared on someone's screen, how often your posts have been shared, and other statistics. By looking at your analytics, which often appear as a tab in your settings, you can learn which of your posts are connecting most with your audience. This information can help you as you plan and create future posts. And I just want to say, this is one of my favorite things to do. It's like, as you learn more about social media, that there are fewer learning resources that are very specific to what you need to know. And so what I do at our organization is I study our analytics in order to give myself a sense of what's working and what's not. And then I always try and do more of what's working and a little bit less of what wasn't working, and always try and grow that way. Okay, number 10, hashtags, which is another thing that Lexi was just talking about. You can use these to connect your posts with specific topics of interest. For example, people might follow a hashtag for something that interests them, like hashtag #IamVista. When they click on the hashtag, they can view a timeline of the tweets that have used that hashtag. It's one approach people use to reduce the chaos of Twitter into something that's meaningful for them. But here's a couple of tips. Using too many hashtags or hashtags that no one uses can clutter up your posts. The best way to learn about hashtags is to observe how others use them and find the popular ones that most relate to your work. And so that wraps up our top 10. Like I said, we've moved through that pretty quickly. And so if you have questions, what we do want to come back to those in a few minutes. But in the meantime, let's take a moment for another chat question. Now here's a tweet we looked at just for a moment earlier. In the chat box, if you could say what you think is going on in this tweet, that makes it effective. We're only looking at the positives for now. We're going to have a chance in a minute here to look at how this tweet can be improved. But what are the positives in this particular tweet, and just send those to everybody.
Mm-hmm. We've already got some responses coming in, Rich, and it looks like there are positive responses to the shortened link to make room for more content. It directly mentions someone. It's also informative. Tagging the source, there's action words, there's a hashtag, the interactive link. having city year tagged in the message so people can also go to their Twitter account. Quick facts, it's short, easy to understand statistics with a link to evidence. So that means it's also informative and engaging. And there's a direct action to outcome, and it uses positive language. It improves instead of focusing on negative issue. They're still coming in, so there's a couple more here. Clear and easy to understand. And a clear message, a modified tweet that includes the organization, that provides the info, the source, and also a short link. So I think that is most of them for the responses to your questions.
Yeah, those are all, again, like, there's just reading those is the way that, like, if you're learning this stuff for the first time, the responses from all your participants is really the best way to learn this. A couple observations I make on this one is that I particularly like that it does have a takeaway that someone who's interested in mentoring or attendance or reducing dropouts would get from this. And it kind of like piques your interest to what's behind that link. The other thing I want to say is that this is a modified tweet that's coming from an organization called Loving Houston, and it's originally from City Year. And so what that does is it kind of like connects Loving Houston to City Year, because City Year will notice. If you like tag City Year panel in a tweet, most likely their social media person is going to notice that you did that. And it kind of does, like, if you do this over time and with enough organizations, you do create like a network of people who will support each other on Twitter, which is actually a really like great benefit to retweeting and mentioning other people in your own posts. So let's go to the flip side of this question now. And what do you think can improve this tweet? So we're keeping this positive still, but there are ways to make this tweet better. And so, and one thing I see right away is the hashtag is over the S. It's like, I think what they meant to do here is make dropouts the hashtag, but they put the hashtag only over the S. And so hashtag S is not a viable hashtag. If you search for that, you're going to find nonsense. You're not going to find anything related to this tweet. And Molly, I'm going to let you go back to narrating these a bit.
Sure. So many of the attendees have already pointed out that the hashtag that you mentioned was a little strange. And it looks like maybe the second sentence is a little confusing. Spell out MIT or explain what MIT is. Let's say they suggest also adding an infographic. Maybe also including another hashtag like hashtag mentoring or hashtag help our community. Maybe also include a call to action. Use data. Also add a picture again. Add some numbers. Maybe add a quote and some other information. Use complete sentences. And also explain attendees for what? College, high school? We're not really sure. And maybe clean up the punctuation a little bit as well. So
these are great. And a few people caught something that I didn't catch. The hashtag S actually means numbers, which like that just went right over my head, partly because as soon as you add the hashtag symbol, the number symbol, it turns something into a hashtag even if you don't want it to. And so in this case, they were using some shorthand in order to say the word numbers, but it didn't quite work because, like, at the very least, I was confused. Others of you might have just, like, immediately picked up on it. But a couple other things that I didn't want to call attention to would be maybe using other hashtags, like maybe making mentoring or attendance or dropouts into a hashtag. And then I also saw some people post hashtags like stop the drop and other things that are getting used in the field that might be effective to use in here. And as often as I'm on Twitter, when I see MT, I'm like, that one's still a tough one for me. It's like a retweet. It means a modified tweet. It's not the clearest thing in the world. So if I were going to do this, I might have like created an original tweet, but tagged City Year and gone to their resource, maybe saying like my own original tweet and then say via City Year and then their link and then going to that. And then the other thing I would do with this tweet is I'd add a photo or infographic or something like that, because the research shows that you get quite a bit more attention to your tweets if you are able to include a graphic of some kind. And so those are the things I mentioned on this one. So we can now move on to the next bit here. And like I said earlier, we're going to talk a little bit more about best practice number 2. And all you need to really, you don't need to know that it was best practice number 2. The main thing is that this is the one that deals with understanding different audiences for different platforms. When you're setting up your social media, you should check out how others from your organization or agency, your partners, and even your competitors reach out to your targeted audience over different platforms. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some generalizations about how some of the top social media sites that can help you determine how much effort you want to give to your social media platforms. So first, there's Twitter. It's often used by organizations to disseminate information. Orgs also tweet about events occurring in real time, which is something called live tweeting, and trending topics. How it works best is spreading the word via links, posting updates, or photos in real time. And I just want to say that, like, from your own experience, and I can tell that there's quite a few participants who have quite a bit of social media experience in the webinar right now. You might be able to think of like many different uses or many different ways you use it, but I'm just trying to keep this in a very general sense. So these are just what I see as being the top ways for nonprofits and VISTA projects to think about something like Twitter. Now, Facebook. Facebook is used by people connecting with friends and sharing items with a like-minded audience. How it works best, you can create a highly functional page for your project where you can post updates, photos, links, and even create events with Facebook tracking who you invited and who has RSVP'd. Your supporters can like your page and post, and when they do, their friends might take notice and follow suit. And this is powerful stuff when it comes to outreach. Next is LinkedIn. LinkedIn is used by people who are engaged in professional learning and networking. Unlike other social media, people want something out of their involvement with LinkedIn. How it works best for posting opportunities for professional advancement or learning, or posting articles related to the field. And the last one we're going to cover is Instagram, which is used by younger people to connect, even though older people are definitely going to Instagram now in droves. How it works best is for posting photos using hashtags to search for similar photos. And a couple others I'll mention. There's YouTube, Pinterest, Tumblr, Google+, Ello, and others. As the bullet point says, it's worth assessing as many platforms as are available. And if you can reach an audience on any one of them, they might be worth pursuing. If you're spending a lot of time posting on a platform, however, and getting very little audience engagement, it might be worth reassessing your approach to whether that platform is a viable option for you. And we won't take that much time to look closely at various demographics here, but it's worth checking out this report that shows social media trends based on factors such as gender, age, race, education, and income. Among top social media sites, Facebook has by far the most users in categories related to poverty. And Bethany just posted a link to where you can get this research. I think it's, again, this is something that like I could look at this research for hours and just try and figure out how to like use those particular numbers to basically write better posts, whether on Twitter, Facebook, or any other social media platform. And so I'm going to conclude my part of the presentation with a quick word on planning and goal setting. So number one, plan ahead how often you'll post per day or week. Now the research says that on Twitter, 5 to 6 tweets a day are often effective. Posting every weekday or close to that on Facebook and LinkedIn is also a good goal. Number two, set a reasonable goal for gaining new followers. Keep track of how many followers you are attracting and set a goal for growth. You can gain followers by promoting your feeds outside of social media, such as putting your handle in your email signature and on business cards, and by telling people about your social media presence at every opportunity. Slow but steady growth is good. So I just want to say one more thing about that. As the slide shows, on average, social media grows for active social media feeds by about 3.5% per month. And so that's something to look at. So like if you're growing your social media and you see it's exceeding 3.5, you know you're doing something right. But if you're more like 1 or 2%, you might like really look at what you're doing and see if there's a way you might do it better if one of your goals is to attract a lot of new followers. See, number 3 is keep track of effective hashtags and successful tweets. Over time, by seeing how people interact with your posts and by checking your analytics, you'll get a good sense of the lay of the land when it comes to hashtags and elements of a successful post. Since your role includes capacity building, it's a great idea to keep this information on what you've learned in a document so that others who might take over your social media duties after your VISTA term can keep going with the momentum you have built. Okay, so lastly, here's a few resources I mentioned during my part of the presentation. These will also be linked from the campus page where this webinar's recording will live.
Great. Richard, thank you so much. We will post those links into the chat and make sure that they're also available after the session. But now we are going to hear from our final guest, Mike Kizone. Mike is a VISTA Marketing and Outreach Specialist at the Corporation for National and Community Service in Washington, D.C. Mike, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you, Molly. Hello, everyone. Happy to be part of this webinar. As Molly said, my name is Mike Kizone, and I am the Marketing Outreach Specialist with the VISTA team here at headquarters in D.C. Just a little bit about me. I am the Marketing Outreach Specialist on the Marketing Outreach team, and I focus on visual design, social media, email, and web marketing. If you follow our Twitter and Facebook accounts, that's primarily me. I manage our social media tweets and posts. And if you've been following us the last few weeks or so, you probably have caught on to our hashtag #IamVista portrait photos, which highlight many of you. Now, what I would like to do is change gears a little bit and talk to you about a new project that we've been working on. It's about visual storytelling, and it's on a platform that maybe you haven't used yet, maybe you have, and we would love for you to join us. Our challenge on the marketing team is to tell the VISTA story, which is your story. And you're all doing amazing work across multiple sectors with an array of organizations, increasing their capacities to lift people out of poverty. And you're doing this all over the country. And it really is a great story that needs to be told. And it's a story that needs to be seen as well. It's a story that needs to be visual. It's a story that needs to be authentic, beyond the elevator speech. If you had time to actually, sit with someone on a weekly basis over coffee, what would you get into? How would you describe your service if you had the time and space to do that? It's also a story that we feel like has many diverse points of view, because certainly while we sort of have the primary audience from the sort of corporate headquarters accounts, really there are many VISTAs with many voices and amazing points of view that we would love to see. So how do we tell that story visually and meet all the criteria? Well, we believe the answer is vlogging. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, blogs, they're all wonderful platforms, but none of them are quite as immersive as video. And when you create a series of videos, you're no longer just posting snapshots of your experience, you're actually telling a story. And you're telling it in real time over the course of your service. And you may be asking, why now? Hasn't this been done before, or don't you need, some amazing video camera or special software? Well, the truth is, it's never been easier to record and upload video. There's many ways to do it, and really all you really need in terms of hardware is a camera phone and Wi-Fi. And if you're interested, please check out some of these vlogs. And thank you, Bethany, for posting those links. So I hope I have piqued your interest somewhat. I'm sure that you have lots of questions in terms of, how can I be a part of this vlogging project, which is why we will actually be holding a separate session dedicated exclusively to just vlogging. And so if you are interested, please send us an email at vistaoutreach@cns.gov, or if you'd like to chat with me personally offline, give me a call at that number there. And our first blogging information session, which will be online, will be in 2 weeks on October 7th at 1 o'clock. And that's it for me. We hope to see some of you on October 7th.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Mike. And also many, many thanks to Richard and Lexi for also spending some time with us. Before we go to the Q&A portion of this webinar, we want to know what you thought. So on the right side of your screen, you will find a quick poll where you can share some feedback about the webinar. Please take a moment to answer the questions. We do look at these responses, and we want to improve these webinars, and your input definitely does help us. So we've given you a lot to think about, and now it's time for your questions. Many of you have already submitted questions via the Q&A panel. I'll remind you all that if you want to ask questions via the WebEx module, please make sure they're going into the Q&A panel and not the chat panel. And now, Crystal, could you come back on and remind us how to ask questions via the phone?
Absolutely. To ask a question from the phone lines, you press *1. You will be prompted to unmute your phone and record your name. Your name is required to introduce your question. Again, it's *1 to ask a question. One moment, please, for the first question.
Great. And Crystal, while we are waiting for questions to come in via the phone, we're going to go ahead and move through some of the questions that we have on the WebEx module. So some of these might have been answered as we moved through the presentation, but let me see. Let me just get down a little bit so that I can see what's been assigned. Okay. Let's see. So Elizabeth would like to know, how do you deal with making recurring posts interesting? And Rich, what would you like to share about recurring posts?
Yeah, that goes along with another question I saw posted. It was someone posted a question about having an event coming up and wanting to post about it quite a bit, but wanting to know when is too much. And so with recurring posts, my thought would be to, okay, so like when we put out a new blog post here, usually we do 5 or 6 different tweets based on that one blog post, and we modify the message each time with a slightly different message to it. Like, for instance, we had a blog post that came out this morning, and it's someone from Alaska. And so one of the blog posts mentions Alaska a couple times, and other times it mentions more of an equity focus. Other times it's more about a research focus. And so we're trying to, like, see which message resonates the most. But to get back to this question, I do think trying to modify like if you're tweeting the same event or same link to the same content repeatedly, the more variation you can give your different posts, the better. Or if you can get other people to put out pretty much the same message, but it's going out to their audience instead. That's another way you can keep the same message, but have it go out from other people. When it comes to how frequently you should post, I've noticed that if you're posting a piece of original content like a blog post, people will get tired if you keep posting the same, like if you keep trying to get people to go to the same blog post several times, your audience eventually will get pretty tired of that. However, with events, people have quite a bit more tolerance because they understand, they're more sympathetic. They understand you're trying to get people to go to an event or participate in some kind of project that's going on. And so they do understand a little bit better if you are tweeting or posting on Facebook a little more frequently with something like that. And again, so another approach to being able to modify tweets would be to use different photos. So you can keep the message very similar, but if you use a different photo each time, that's another way to like kind of refresh the tweet or the post on whatever social media platform you're using. And as long as you're keeping everything somewhat fresh, even people who might have like read your blog post or clicked the link the very first time you posted it, when they see it again, they won't mind it so much if they're seeing it framed just a little bit differently. If you're posting the exact same message often, like if you're posting it, like especially if you're posting it several times within the same day or even the same hour, you will start to build some intolerance on the part of your audience, and you actually lose followers, and or people just start zoning you out if they see the same thing too often. So I hope I answered that question. If not, ask and follow up in the chat box.
Sure. Rich, I think you gave a lot of important viewpoints, and you know, leading into another question that you touched on from Karen, it sounds like as long as you, even if you are asking for the same thing, like you want money or there's some fundraising coming up, as long as you add some variation and maybe you connect it to say, you know, X dollars will support this with the program or organization, and add some different information each day, it's probably okay to really drive it home and be repetitive with a little variety.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Okay. Then one other strategy, you know, going back to my previous response, another strategy is to, like, if you are every day posting about an upcoming fundraiser, if you pad those posts with other content also, it could be tweets on related stuff, but as long as it's not the only thing people are seeing from you all the time, then that's another strategy too. But that's a really great idea.
Great. All right, I'm going to check in with Crystal to see if we might have any questions via the phone before we go next to another question online. Crystal?
And there are no questions in queue at this time.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question from Kenisha. She says, I'd like to bring our host site on board in terms of promoting Vista on their social media platforms. And I was wondering if there's an editable version of this presentation that I might be able to use when trying to engage our host sites in social media. Rich?
Yeah, so the webinar recording and the, I believe a PDF of the PowerPoint will be available. But also, I'll have Bethany type in my email address into the chat box. And if you're just following along, it's richard.melo, M-E-L-O, at educationnorthwest.org. And I could send you the original PowerPoint or anything like that also. And if you have specific questions like that, I'd be able to help you out.
Thank you, Rich. Another question from Chelsea is, and you touched a little bit about this with different types of platforms, but Chelsea would like to know what is the best platform to use for smaller organizations that are in a smaller area. And I don't know if she means rural or if she just means a small population center.
Yeah, I think either whether it's rural or a small population center, or even if you're just a very small grassroots type of organization, I think probably Facebook is the best one. Just by looking at the demographics, you do get more rural people on Facebook than you do Twitter. And you like at our organization, we work with people, quite a few people in Alaska in particular, and also a lot of the Pacific Islands. And we seem to be able to reach them better through Facebook than Twitter or LinkedIn or other platforms. But really, there's really no good rule of thumb for knowing where your audience is. So you might want to do a little need sensing and just like ask people. It doesn't have to be necessarily a formal survey, but just like get a sense of the people in your audience who you want to reach. What excites them? What social media platform excites them most? Is it Facebook? Is it Twitter? In some cases, in really rural areas, it's the newsletter that comes out like on paper once in a while. That's the way to get a hold of people in some areas, and like rural areas in particular. But so just finding whatever method is best for reaching the people you want to is the best way to go. And like either just asking people or designing a survey or something like that might be the best way to get that information.
Okay. Great. Thanks again. Catherine would like to know, and I think you touched upon this earlier, Rich, but Catherine would like to know, if you're utilizing multiple social media platforms, can you make a different post on each platform according to the intended audience?
Yeah, it's like that would be ideal, but realistically, if you put the exact same post on LinkedIn as you do on Facebook, which is just a modification of something you put on Twitter, it's often okay to do that. But the thing is, it is good to keep in mind that that like your LinkedIn audience will be looking for different things than your Facebook audience, where your Facebook audience might be looking for things that they want to share with their friends, versus on LinkedIn, people might be looking at something that can help them in their career. And so it's definitely worth it to modify your messages, but one of the things I do often is I'll post the same exact message on 3 different places with at least moderate success doing that. I could probably be more successful if I spent the time to really tailor things just right, but I don't always do that.
Okay. Crystal, do we have any questions on the phone?
I'm sorry, but there are no questions at this time.
Okay, we've got plenty more online, so I'll just keep going. Gina would like to know, and Richard, this is another one for you, is it better to retweet your own tweets, or to restate or reshare the info, or is it better to write a new post on the same topic?
I always think it's better to write a new post on the same topic rather than retweeting your own tweet. However, like I was saying earlier, if you are able to get your close, I wouldn't say friends, but the people you work with who care about the work, if you're able to get them to retweet the same message over their social media accounts, that's an awesome way of using the same message in different environments and helping spread the word. But I definitely encourage people to avoid sending out the exact same message multiple times. I mean, it's one of those things like on Twitter, like if you post at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday, and the people you want to have read it at 9:30 a.m. on Tuesday don't open Twitter that day at all, they've missed the message. And so it's one of these things where it's like you never really know what's the best time to tweet, how often to tweet. Sometimes 3 in the morning is the best time to tweet something because no one else is tweeting anything, and people will actually, if they're up, they'll actually pay attention to it. So it's one of these like totally non-scientific sciences for determining the best time to tweet things, and whether or not like modifying your message is a good idea or retweeting the same message is a good idea. But just from my experience, I would always suggest modifying, like even if it's the same exact material, just changing a few words just so it looks a little bit different, so you might catch people in different times, different places, in different ways.
Okay. Kathy would like to know, where can you find out what hashtags to use about a certain topic?
Yeah, that's a tricky one, and like I know that like when I post things, what I'll do is I'll like search for what like our competitors, not necessarily our competitors, but people, like-minded organizations are how they're tweeting about a particular topic, and then to see if they're using hashtags and which ones they're using. It's one of the things where like one of the things we care about quite a bit here is early childhood education. And so like if I keep like reading tweets about early childhood education, I'll start picking up on some of the hashtags. And then what I'll do is I'll actually click the hashtag and I'll see if there's any real activity behind it. Sometimes people post hashtags, and sometimes people just make up hashtags too that haven't really caught on. And so like when you actually do a search, you'll find that only like maybe 2 people have ever used it, and one of them was recent and one of them was back in like 2011. And so so hashtags, it's one of these things where probably the best way to find the hashtags for a certain topic would be, well, to like do some searching on Twitter, just watching Twitter, and then kind of like over time just figuring out like what's working best. It's not something that you might not be able to do it like just sit down and 15 minutes later know all the right hashtags. It might be something that evolves over time, but definitely it's worth, like it's an area where you could learn, but it's I don't really have any great foolproof advice for learning what all the great hashtags are about any subject.
Okay, great. Well, if there are any participants and attendees that want to share some insight via chat about hashtags, please feel free to do so. We're all here to learn. Let's see, let's move on to a question from Kenneth, and this is about best platforms. he said that I've heard that Facebook use is declining among younger people, whereas Instagram use is climbing. Is that true? Has Facebook peaked?
Yeah, that's one of those things, again, where like Facebook, I wouldn't necessarily say it's peaked. It might be a little less cool. If anything, I feel like Twitter and Facebook have both just become institutionalized, where there's so many people on there, and both platforms are constantly evolving, and so that they're both still very viable. However, if you do want a younger audience, like if you want a younger audience, period, with social media, you should be looking at Instagram, but also anything new that's coming along down the pike, and being an early adopter of any kind of new platform, because it's just one of the traits of young people is that they really want something that is newer than they want something that is older. It's just one of those things that I have a teenager who is always looking for the next best social media, and she doesn't really want to participate in any of the older social media type platforms. And so, like, you know, just to finish my thought here, I would say don't ignore Facebook or Twitter, even though it may appear that Facebook has peaked. And if you're looking for a younger audience, definitely investigate Instagram and pursue anything new that comes along that starts getting any buzz to it.
Richard, I think that's great advice. Facebook looks like it's here to stay. Before I go on to the next question online, Crystal, I just want to check in with you to make sure I don't ignore anyone that might dial in. Do we have any questions on the phone?
There are no questions in queue, and for just a quick reminder, if you do have a question from the phone lines, please press *1. Thank you.
All right. Kat would like to know, how do you view analytics on Twitter? Richard, are you able to help us out with that one?
Yeah, so what you do on Twitter, and I'm not going to remember, I remember on Twitter because I just did it this morning, but and I won't remember on the other ones, but you go to your settings, and then on your settings, you'll see a bunch of different paths to follow, and one of them is analytics. And how Twitter sets it up is it just gives you, like, on the surface, it gives you a monthly peek at what your Twitter's on. This could be your personal account, this could be a professional account or an organizational account, but it'll give you, like, how many views and how many new followers you have over the past month. You can also dig down and get more deep into statistics also, but at the very least, it gives you a really brief snapshot of what's been happening in the past month for you. And then you can also look at, like, how you did in August and July and June, and go back in time and kind of, like, see how you're doing back then also.
All right, Lauren would like to know, I work for a worldwide organization that has one Facebook page that is very strictly monitored. How can I use social media to my advantage when I cannot post often and when we have a fairly restricted audience, since our particular program is regional?
Yeah, that's, okay, so to me that's a very hard question, and not something I've had to deal with myself, but I can understand that there would definitely be a need in order to reach out to your own more regional people, but it sounds like there's a very strict social media policy. So I do invite people who have a better answer than I do, and right now, like, just at this moment, I don't have a good answer for that, other than maybe looking very closely at the social media policy for the organization and finding out if there is any flexibility, like maybe doing something different that's local, like maybe a blog or something, and then promoting it maybe through a newsletter. But, like, maybe you have to, like, bypass Facebook and maybe other social media too. I'm not sure exactly what the policy is, but you might have to bypass some of the main outreach social media in order to get messages out via, say, like WordPress, where you're posting regular blog posts, but then you put into an email newsletter that you send out once a month or once every 2 weeks or so. So that might be one approach if that's allowed, but it really depends on what's allowed. And you know, I get why organizations like some organizations do have to have a very strict messaging that has to go through their central office before anything goes out. So I do understand that like reasons why people do that, but my own soapbox idea is that there also needs to be some way for regional offices to be in touch with their regional constituents too. But again, I might be able to give you a better response by email too. So if you want to email me, and again, it's richard.mello@educationnorthwest.org, and I might be able to find a better answer than that. And again, if anyone has experience with this, please do submit your ideas.
Yeah, and I think Kylie, the participant who asked that question, just posted in the chat that she would love to connect with anyone else working with refugees or immigrants. Sounds like she wants to do a little networking on the webinar, and she's with the Multilingual and Multicultural Center, Portland Public Schools, so check out in the chat. Okay, let's see. So, this question is from Kylie. I misspoke. Kylie would like to know, do you have an opinion on the best blogging platform? If we have a website that cannot integrate a blog like WordPress, should we instead utilize Tumblr?
Yeah, that's another tough question. I like WordPress myself. I feel like it's the most functional. And if your website, okay, so and I hope I'm answering this correctly. If your website cannot integrate WordPress, you might look closely at the website, and you might talk to any IT people, because usually you can integrate WordPress. Most stuff will integrate WordPress. Tumblr is great, but I feel like it's really limited in the way for sharing information. Maybe other people have had different experiences than I have, but it seems like when I look at Tumblr, mostly it's people posting images in a timeline that you can't really search when you don't really necessarily see when the posts were made. So for me, and I haven't used Tumblr in a couple of years, so it might be way different now than it was last time I used it. But I found that it wasn't really the best outreach tool that was available. It was, for me, it was more like if you're just posting a bunch of like images on a theme, then it was working great. Or if you're posting, yeah, so basically images on a theme, it seemed to work. But it seems like if you can't integrate WordPress, like would Tumblr, I don't know if Tumblr would work either. But yeah, again, I wish I had a better answer for that question, and I'd be happy to chat with you via email about that as well.
All right.
And again, if people have better experience, if people have more experience, please add that to the chat box.
Okay. All right, our next question is about hashtags. Rich, it's from Cynthia. And she says, when using hashtags, I know you mentioned creating your own hashtags, but should you include frequently used or common hashtags as well in order to get more reach?
Yeah, you should yeah, definitely use common hashtags. Like if you want to get the attention of the Vista audience, using the Vista 50 and the I Am Vista hashtags, but you should definitely be using common hashtags. Actually, the more common the hashtag, the more chance of people noticing it, basically. Some hashtags are like so used. They're like any hashtag related to, well, like a few years ago, Justin Bieber. Like the Belieber hashtag, like just was flowing faster than you could possibly read a Twitter timeline back in its heyday. So using the common popular hashtags will help get you noticed, but at the same time, there are some hashtags that if they're just too overused, then you might not get noticed because you'll just be like buried in a stream that's moving very quickly. And so the trick, especially in the Vista and the nonprofit world, is finding a hashtag that's used by people who really are looking for information in that particular area and that check it regularly. And there's quite a few hashtags for people like that. And once you find them, the ones that relate to what you're doing, then you're in a good place.
All right. Going back to our Q&A, I lost my place here, so just give me 1 second. And let's see. Shane would like to know. Shane, we didn't skip your question because your question is right now next in queue. Shane would like to know, do you have any research or strategies for using Periscope and Snapchat for a social media channel?
And, you know, Shane, like I've looked at both of those, and I don't have any strategies. Like, if anyone has some that are good, those two don't seem to fit in with, when I was talking about, like, the main things that you want to do as a nonprofit with social media, which is, like, sharing information and fueling campaigns, engaging conversation. Those don't work as well. Those, at least Snapchat will help engage in conversation, but I don't know if it's the kind of conversation that helps build an audience for the other things you want to do. So if people have ways that they're using those effectively with Vista, I would love to hear those. But, like, you know, I just don't know enough about those to know if those would actually help with the things that at least we're trying to do in Education Northwest. Maybe, like, I know that as Vistas, you guys are working in all these different contexts, and so there's maybe ways that you're able to use those that are more effective. But again, so this is one of those things where if you have ideas, please post them.
Hi, if I could jump in real quick, this is my T-zone. Periscope and Snapchat and Beam, those are all relatively newcomers to the social media world, and I think definitely you know, folks are still sort of figuring out the best way to use them. While I think everyone is sort of trying to get their foothold on how best to move forward on those, essentially the one way to look at it is that it's live streaming, it's broadcasting, and some of you may have caught some of the live stream that we did last week when George R.R. Martin participated in the New Mexico Vista 50. That was done via through the website. It was actually called live stream. But essentially what Periscope does and Beam and Meerkat and Snapchat, essentially, they all sort of do that feature, but it's from your phone. And it's, you know, like I said, it's live streaming, it's broadcasting. I think the best way to do it is sort of in the context that we did for the event last week, which is when you know something, when you know that you're going to go to an event or going to be part of an event, and then you think it could work well visually, you can notify folks of the event when it's going to happen, and then when you're there, you point your phone, and now you're broadcasting the event. But you have to sort of plan it carefully because, you know, like I said, it's on your phone, so you've got to make sure your phone is charged. You've got to make sure, you know, that you've sort of staked out the territory so you know you're getting the best light, that that make sure that it actually will work visually. Because once you're live streaming, there's really, you know, you can't redo it. It's just sort of happening. But those platforms are growing an audience because they are relatively new. And I can't speak to all of the platforms, but I know Periscope is linked into Twitter. So if you have a Twitter account and you open a Periscope account, the advantage there is that when you do decide to live stream, it sends a message to all of your Twitter followers that, hey, I'm on air right now, check out what I'm broadcasting. And this is actually one of the topics that we would be covering in our blogging information session in 2 weeks. Live streaming is certainly one way that folks can vlog about their experience, but like I said, it is live, and it's sort of like the challenge to YouTube, which is, you know, something that you produce and you edit, and you take a little more time to do that.
Mike, thank you so much for jumping in. That was great advice to share. And Rich, also thank you. I know we have more questions in queue, but again, Crystal, I wanted to check in with you to see if we have anyone on the phone.
Thank you. There are no questions in queue at this time.
Okay. So Michael has a pretty big question. He would like to know, how do you make impactful YouTube videos for topics like homeless awareness? And how do I get more Facebook people turned on to Twitter?
Okay, so Actually, Mike, if you want to handle the video question, because that's not really in my area, but really briefly, I could tell you one thought on how to get more Facebook people turned on to Twitter would be to use on Facebook to post links to your Twitter often. Like, use Twitter kind of as your hub for sharing information, and then you could take the link from the individual tweet and post that on Facebook, and so people, every time they're following on Facebook or they're interested in something that you're posting on Facebook, they would actually get filtered through Twitter, and then after a while, if they're interested enough, they'll become more involved in Twitter. But that's one way of looking at it. But I would say that actually the better approach, now that I thought about it for a couple minutes, is if your audience prefers Facebook, you should meet your audience where your audience is at. And so it might be best to just feed your Facebook page with whatever you're doing on Twitter by just tailoring it for Facebook and just letting your audience stay there. I think it is pretty hard to migrate an audience. I've seen like people be able to do that before, with especially a few years ago when social media was a little more nomadic and people were going from places like LiveJournal into Facebook, or they were going from, was it Tribe, and like Friendster. But now it seems like the social media universe has kind of settled into these areas where there's a lot of people on Facebook who just aren't going to go anywhere else. That's where they want to be able to open Facebook and see their stuff and not have to also look at Twitter also. So my advice would be to either, if you want people to pay more attention to your Twitter, then post links to your Twitter stuff on Facebook, but then also just post stuff on Facebook too for the people who just aren't ever going to follow you over to another account. And so Mike, do you have anything on the video question?
Yeah, and thanks, Richard. And just to piggyback on what Richard said as well, I 100% agree. I think the strategy that works best in social media is to, I think participants, people that are in Twitter versus people that are on Facebook versus people that are on YouTube versus people that are on Instagram, they like to stay where they're at. And so I completely agree. I think I would, instead of trying to think about it in terms of porting over one audience from one platform to another, I think what may be more, what gets folks the content they need more directly is to actually just sort of create your content so that it's going to different platforms instead of trying to keep everyone on the same one, because people are kind of attached to their platform regardless of their content. That's just sort of the way they go about their social media life. But on video, I think generally, I don't know that sector specific I would have advice, but I think in general, just some good tips for building an audience is to create a series of videos that are 2 to 3 minutes tops. And instead of doing sort of one long video that is overproduced and sort of does soup to nuts on the topic, I think what's more interesting to folks out there is to do sort of frequent postings of a few minutes or less, and you come back to the same topic every week, and you give sort of a, like in this episode, you're covering something and you're covering it really quickly. You come back next week, you cover sort of a slightly different angle, a slightly nuanced angle on the topic, and what that does is that it allows the audience to build. It allows you to sort of get the most bang for your buck in terms of content, and it allows you also to, when you film it, you get more dynamism in your content when it's that sort of when it's that sort of compressed, as opposed to something that is much longer, because then the audience attention sort of flags somewhat. And then the other thing I would say, just generally speaking as well, is in terms of engaging video, is to make sure that it's not simply talking head, that there are tracking shots, that there are landscape shots, there are what folks in video call color shots, which are not necessarily just the primary subject, but also gives you a sense of the context of the environment that they're in. So yeah, I guess that's what I would say in terms of general video advice.
Excellent. Thank you both so much for a very thoughtful answer. We're transitioning to a question about hashtags, and Teray would like to know how many hashtags are too many on Instagram?
Just as a rule of thumb, and I have to admit again that I don't use Instagram as much as I use the other different social media platforms, and that the audience that we are reaching here at Education Northwest is usually it's teachers, principals, and superintendents, and so we haven't really found our audience on Instagram as much. But I would say that that hashtags are very useful for people to be able to find what you're looking for, but too many is too many. I would say like including, I mean, what ends up happening is a post that on Instagram or Twitter or any place that has too many hashtags will start to, it'll start to lose its message in that it just starts looking busy and cluttered. And so I would really just focus on 2 or 3 of the best possible hashtags, and I completely invite responses for other people who use Instagram more than I do on that.
All right. Mike, do you have anything to add about Instagram?
No, I would echo that as well. I think definitely, gosh, probably not more than 2 or 3, and even that might be too much, especially on a platform like Twitter, where percentage-wise, if you have a couple phrases dedicated to hashtags, that may take up like half of your posts. So then it becomes sort of unwieldy. I feel like the other platforms like Facebook and Instagram are a little bit more forgiving, just simply because in terms of percentage, their character limit is larger, so it doesn't like take up the entire message. But yeah, in general, I think I would agree with Richard that it's you want to limit the use of hashtags. One strategy that you can use to get more mileage out of your content is to maybe find a way to take the essentially the same message and carve it up into 2 and divide up your hashtags accordingly. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. Thank you for adding that. I know that we're getting to the end of our time. We've got a couple more questions, so hopefully we'll be able to get through them. Joshua says, I'm serving in a smaller community that has a subreddit whose membership represents about 4% of the census population. Would it be appropriate to post volunteer opportunities and link fundraising events there? Rich, what do you think?
And, again, this is an area where I don't really, I know the basic principles, but I don't know the more specifics here. But if it's an audience that, if other people are posting volunteer opportunities and fundraising events on this platform, then go ahead and try it. If you've never seen them there, then it might seem out of place, and they might contribute to, they might just be like ignored posts. Yeah, Mike, do you have any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, we don't work much in Reddit. In fact, not at all. On my personal social media activity, I've explored Reddit a little bit more. And to me, it's not the best sort of environment for sort of public agencies or organizations, in my opinion, at least from the stuff I've seen. It's more sort of a genre crowd, if you will. So folks are there to sort of find things of sort of personal interest. And I think you would probably be best served finding your audience on other platforms. The other thing too about Reddit is that the folks that are active in Reddit are super active, and so they can sometimes sort of sniff out folks that are trying to market to them when that's not really Reddit's thing. So you may not get a huge response on that platform.
And I'll just add one more thing, that a lot of social media marketing is driven by innovation, by people like you guys. And so if you see a way to use Reddit to create an audience for volunteer opportunity, if you're able to bring volunteers out using Reddit, then if you find a way to do that, then it might be worth attempting. But at the same time, you don't want to get yourself in any kind of trouble either by posting in places that aren't appropriate to your organization too, if that ever emerged as any kind of issue.
All right, thanks to you both. We're going to do one more question before I tell everyone about the next webinar that we have coming up. And this is a question from Esther, and if you could just limit your response to maybe 30 to 60 seconds. She would like to know what best suggestions do you have for using photos on social media for organizations that serve victims of domestic violence? It is challenging to show the case of the services and events, and as much as I would like to, for reasons pertinent to protecting the client. So it sounds like she's not sure how she can get the point across without using images of the clients of the organization.
Yeah, that is a tough one, and that you definitely, in this particular instance, you would not want to use photos of people most of the time. There might be certain instances where you do. What I would suggest is learning how to do infographics, and these you're going to be able to create. Once you get the hang of it, they aren't that hard to create. Sometimes they're hard to conceptualize, but they aren't necessarily hard to create. You can do them in a program like Photoshop or Illustrator, or you could also, there's also pretty easy online platforms that will help you create a quick infographic. But I would mostly include statistics and things like that draw attention to whatever it is you want to post over social media, whether it's an event or something. But I would use mostly text and numbers as your images versus images of people in this case.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Rich. That was some great advice also. And now I'm just going to thank you all, first of all, for attending this webinar, and hope that you can join us on October 15th. We have a little different session coming ahead. We're going to talk about managing student loans, just about 3 weeks away. So you can check the webinars page under Connect and Learn on the Vista campus to sign up for future webinars, and we really hope to see you again. Have a great day, everyone, and thanks for serving with Vista. And thanks to all of our presenters as well.